Welcome to Nothing Finer. I'm your host, Rick Beach, along with Austin Allen. A couple weeks till kickoff. Got, 40 days from today?
Mm-hmm.
Got media days was last week. Kirby showed why he's the king of the podium. Looking good for them recruits. Shows why he wins every time he goes into a living room. He's a quote machine. What'd you think about him?
Yeah, I just loved it. I loved his intensity. I loved how he didn't shy away from any tough questions as far as a lot of Bama questions, a lot of what do you got to do to get over the hump. And, I just love it, man. And I think the players all responded to that same degree, just intense and, not afraid to take on any question and not going to let any kind of reporter from any kind of other beat or any other school really shake them. And I was impressed with that.
Yeah, I like how he shows his seriousness side.
Mm-hmm.
Then he also can show that comical side where he can cut up a little bit at the same time, be serious.
Right.
And I think that really relates to people. It relates to these parents where they can see that. And it shows that you can see where he's a hard side on the field. Then he can cut up with the parents, young people. He really mixes up quotes. Man, he is a quote machine. He come up with them, do more. He was saying, we understand how close we've been and how close we are to taking that next step, which is true. And we saw it in spring when they had the shirts. They had the Team E on it. I think on the front it said do more. On the back it said Team E, which is a throwback to the 80s, the Irk Russell, big team, little me. And then it was pressure is a reflection of ambition. I can, that's another great one. Then another one that I've heard before, then he said it. He was saying, I'm not going to be your best friend on the field. I'm a tyrant out there. I'm going to get after it. That's what he tells these recruits. So when they get to Athens, they're not caught off guard when, Kirby does start to flipping out, you see. And you can see him on the sidelines do it, so he's doing it at practice. And, he's just always coming up with things to keep these people going. And I really get impressed. Every time he gets up to the podium, it gets me more fired up for the season. And it seems this is his fourth media days, and it's the fourth time he's got me I was ready to commit right then.
Suit up, ready to suit up.
Yeah, suit up. And, my favorite, we're always looking for the aggregate of marginal gains. That's the small things make the biggest difference. And, you're looking at the Rodrigo Blankenship kick, make that kick, 17 points. We probably win the SEC championship right then. The small, Malcolm Parrish getting burned, Sanders over to the hash too much, lose the game in overtime, the 2nd and 26. Small things make a big difference. And like I said, with Kirby, every time he steps up to a podium, you can see why he steps into these living rooms and dominates.
Yeah, and I love all that. And I was also intrigued by just how intense they were, and then comparing that to what Alabama linebacker Dylan Moses said about Georgia being the toughest game he's played in college so far. And I think he wasn't the only player to really follow that sentiment. And, I think it just shows that Kirby's not scared to take on the biggest of the big, and when they show up, they're real physical.
Yeah.
So to me, that just shows that we're not taking a step back this year. For them to say that, even though they went and got routed by Clemson, for them to say that after the game, for a few days, it took a few days for his body to recover. And I think that just speaks volumes to where Georgia's heading. Yeah,
and it's the physicality aspect of where Kirby wants the team to be. South Carolina player said it. Georgia was the toughest team. They also played Clemson. Kentucky linebacker said it, the toughest team they played, physical team. And that's the brand of football Kirby wants. And Alabama plays the same brand. And that's what you want people to know who they played, win or lose, the next day. And definitely after you play Georgia, you understand who you just played. All right, well, the other thing that came out, Sports Illustrated came out with the top 100 players in college football. Georgia had 6 on the list. At 93 was J.R. Reed. I really don't have a problem with him being at 93. Number 66 was Monty Rice. And I could see Monty at the end of the year being higher up on the list, but I understand 66.
Right.
Richard LeCount was at number 50, and I think that's pretty much perfect for where he is.
Right.
Because he's a player or two away from being a really great elite player, but he's a player or two away from being on the bench with his lack of tackling he showed in the Sugar Bowl. He led the team in tackles last year, but he also missed a lot of key tackles and key moments. But he's a ball hawk. He's around the ball. So I could really see him, if he takes a step up, being a first-round draft pick. But I could also see him, losing out a job maybe to Otis Reese, who could step up in his second year on campus, or maybe one of Louis Hine come in as a true freshman to slide in there. You have any issue with them three?
No, not at all. Well, I have a bit of an issue with J.R. Reed just because, I don't know, he's been pretty solid, and I feel like maybe you could have switched him and LeCount, but I won't gripe about it. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, I understand if you step back from a national aspect, you don't see J.R. Reed on the highlight reels making the interceptions, making these big. He's consistent. We see it in Athens. We see it at Georgia. Every week he's, chopping wood. He's making these plays every play. But I understand he's not making the Dominique Sanders type, interceptions a year. He's not like LeCount where he's real flashy. He just gets his lunch bell, goes to work, and knocks it out. So, I mean, he's a top 100 player, but having him at 93 could have been higher probably, but I ain't got no issue. But I do have an issue with DeAndre Swift coming in at number 37.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And they're going to put him at 37, and they're going to put Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin at number 3. I don't really see it kind of shows the last thing you saw from DeAndre Swift was the Sugar Bowl. He had eight carries and 12 yards and 2 fumbles. But that don't erase what kind of great season he had. When you look at he had 1,000 yards on 163 carries. And I know Taylor had 2,190 yards. How many carries did he have, Austin?
He had over 200 carries, I think, at about 1,989 yards.
Yeah, so you're looking
280 attempts. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so 280 attempps compared to 100, which a Georgia back is not going to get as many carries.
Right, but if you just look at it, I mean, you compare getting 280 for 1989, and then you come over here and you look at DeAndre's 155 for 1,037 with a long of 83, 10 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor only had 15 touchdowns on 280 attempts with a long of 88 and an average of 7.1. So their stats aren't that much different to justify DeAndre sitting back at 37 and him being up at where was he?
You look at DeAndre's best 2 games. The Florida game, which is later in the year, a big game, top 10 matchup. Then the next week against Kentucky, he went off for over 100, I think 150, 160 yards.
Yeah.
And you're looking at that game was to win the East, so you're going against an elite defense. And we know Mark Stoops always has a great defense up in Kentucky. And they had Josh Allen on the outside. Yeah. So there's another great defense, and he goes off where I'm not sure Jonathan Taylor was going against top defenses in the country. So he's just packing stats every week, and that's what leads to him having these numbers. And I don't think you can, get infatuated with these numbers enough and put Swift as a number 37 player. But, Las Vegas has him in the top 5 to win the Heisman.
Yeah. I don't want to be salty about it, but just looking at it more and more, it just kind of makes me mad because 280 carries is kind of ridiculous. And he didn't even break 2,000 yards. And you got DeAndre sitting over here with the, people can say what they want, but DeAndre's got the best move in the country. And he's got the best burst out the hole in the country. He's got the best 5th gear in the country. And I feel like Jonathan Taylor doesn't really compare in most of those categories, even though, he's had that's what they do at Wisconsin. It's not a Jonathan Taylor thing. It's just it don't matter who's back there. They're going to pound the ball over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, that's just how Wisconsin rolls. And, I don't see where he's at 37 is where he should be. Also on the list, Jake Fromm came in at number 23, which they got Tua at number 2. And we've talked about it before on the podcast side. Jake Fromm is better than Tua. He don't have the numbers because Tua packs his stats against the weaker teams and he throws these wide open receivers when Fromm's making the throws and he's not getting these crazy numbers against D2 and weaker SEC teams. He can make a back shoulder throw. He can throw in the traffic, and we've never seen Tua do that. Plus, when Tua's played a great defense, Georgia, Clemson, he seemed to struggle. Even LSU last year kind of had his number, and he was injured in the LSU game. We know what happened in the Georgia game. So it's kind of, I don't see where he's the number 2 player in the country, and Jake Fromm's way back at 23.
Yeah, I'm not buying that either. Jake had a 68.4 completion percentage, 186 completions out of 272 attempts. Obviously we didn't sling it around like Tua did, but that's not how we was built last year. We didn't have to do that because, like we said, we had guys like Holyfield and Swift. So
yeah, we're never going to be built to do. We're never going to be built to have big time quarterback numbers. And if you look back, his freshman year, we make it to the Natty. Obviously, we lose in double overtime. If we win that game, he's in the top 5 on this list. And that's crazy. You're not saying the top 100 winners. You're saying the top 100 players, and you got Jake Fromm at number 23. But then CBS Sports comes out with their NFL draft and got him projected at number 1 overall. So kind of how you're looking at it. College-wise, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think Sports Illustrated got him at 4 or 5 because you have obviously Trevor Lawrence was 1, then you had Tua, then Justin Herbert was in the top 15. So for Fromm to be 23, I think was definitely a slide at Georgia as much as it was Jake Fromm. Then Andrew Thomas was the last Georgia player. He came in at number 17. I think, we've talked about it before, these uniforms. You put a crimson helmet on him, he's going to be in the top 10.
Yeah, pretty much the same with Jake and Tua. I mean, you put Jake in a Bama helmet and you put Tua with a G on his helmet, then you'd probably see the switch of those.
But I think it's not having a national championship does matter because you see a lot of Clemson players on this list that probably are a lot higher than they should be. And, Andrew Thomas, I think this is the second offensive lineman on the list coming in at 17. Oregon had a guy at 13. He's a sophomore, but he missed 6 games last year, so go figure. And I just don't see – I think a lot of this has to do with Georgia not winning a national championship, and we're going to get slotted by the national media. And, to me, let's just go win a championship. You ain't got to worry with it.
Right.
All right. Well, the other thing I want to talk about was looking at the Georgia schedule. We look at other team schedules. Looking at the Georgia schedule, what team, Austin, do you think is the biggest scare in your opinion as far as looking at our schedule, where they're at or where the game's at?
Well, for me, it's kind of out of the box one, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think Missouri is one of the scariest games we're going to play just based off we don't know what they have. And we know what they got with Kelly Bryant. He's a dynamic athlete, and we don't really know how he's going to fit into that system. But for me, you watched the Missouri game last year in 2017. They was able to move the ball. They spread us out a good little bit, and we're not really built to stop that kind of offense. Something that spreads us out so wide, and then after they spread us out and they throw it around, and then they can draw right up the middle, and they were gashing us, for 7-8 yards a run, even though we still ended up winning by 14, 17, whatever it was. But for me, Kelly Bryant's an X factor. And then also another X factor is the bowl ban that Missouri's facing. Missouri, for them, this is going to be their biggest game of the year. This is their SEC championship with a better without a better term to say. It's just for them, it's the biggest game they're going to play, and they're going to be fired up, and they're going to come in Athens, and Kelly Bryant's going to try and make something happen. Just the other day they was asking Kelly Bryant about what he knew about Georgia, and a lot of guys on the Clemson team, told him how it was in 2014 and how physical Georgia is. So I think he knows what he's getting into. But to me, I think it's going to be the unknown is what makes Clemson so dangerous. Every other team we play, we know what's going to happen, barring Auburn with their quarterback situation. But, we already know how to scheme up against every team we're going to play. But for Missouri, we don't know where they're going to take the system. We don't know if Kelly Bryant's going to be slinging it all around, if they're going to develop him in that way or what way they're going to use him. And it's just a scary thing, man, because they play hard.
Well, I think you look at Missouri, and I understand they got Kelly Bryant's coming in. It's going to be a different offense. When Drew Lock was there, obviously they slung it around. When we played them, we were a lot playing back off coverage. They, right. I think 172 yards is what they got as a team, which is a lot against us. Mm-hmm. But we kind of gave them the yards. We just weren't going to let them beat us on the outside. Drew Lock didn't have a passing touchdown, like the only game, and however many games he didn't have a passing touchdown against us. And you look at them now, obviously going back to the bowl ban, that isn't an appeal, so they could take it back and allow them to have a postseason.
I doubt they will.
Which, if they did that, it adds to the game more. You look at Missouri's schedule, they draw Arkansas and Ole Miss out of the West, so you're looking at a potential 8-0 Missouri coming into Athens, which that would mean if Georgia, that's after the Florida game, so you're coming in, Georgia could be at 8-0, 7-0, Missouri's at 8-0. It could be for the East, and it could be a top 10 matchup, especially if they take the bowl ban away, or the postseason ban, rather.
Right.
You're looking at a game that could get even bigger from a national side if they take it away. One of the question marks I have with Missouri is something other people get excited about, Derek Dooley. I don't understand. I don't think he's a quarterback guru like some people are saying. He was a wide receivers coach after being fired at Tennessee. Goes to Dallas, wide receivers coach. So, yeah, he was around some talent with Des Bryant and Cole Beasley. But I don't see how that can make him this great offensive coordinator. So I definitely have question marks with him calling the plays at Missouri. And he's just never proven to be a great offensive coordinator. Now people think he's, this guy that can get you into the league.
Right.
Well, Drew Lock was a freaky talent.
Yeah, Drew Lock was already special.
So
before,
you're not going to,
you know.
he's going to have to change up his play calling because Kelly Bryant can't sit in the pocket and throw it 40, 50 times a game like Drew Lock could. But he could make plays with his legs. So I do understand that can make him a dangerous in a different way. You're looking, they're going to be a lot more RPOs, and you got to respect the run game more than you did the passing game in the past.
Well, if you look back, you know, Georgia hasn't always done well against super athletic quarterbacks. I mean, it's just something that we've had to deal with because it's something that's kind of new to the SEC, you know, not entirely new, but ever since Cam Newton and Tebow, you know, there's been an influx of these guys and the dual threats.
Well, look at the teams that's taken out Alabama when Kirby was at Alabama.
Yeah.
Obviously, Cam Newton, Johnny Manziel, Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Kirby, they won the national championship when Kirby was there. Deshaun Watson put up a huge game in the national championship, over 40 points. Mm-hmm. So Kirby's always struggled with that type of quarterback.
Right.
Now, at the same time, you can look back to his days at Alabama and even at Georgia that we've played a running quarterback that we've had huge games because we shut them down.
Yeah.
And then, but a lot of that has to do with our offense too. If we could put them in a hole, pin years back, go get the quarterback, then all that stuff don't matter. But I think with our defense the way it is, young on the backside, if we're having problems by the time we get to the Missouri game, it's not going to be a good year.
Yeah.
So by the Missouri game, we're going to be dialed in.
But I think if we do well against Kelly Bryant, it's a good tune-up for what could possibly come in the playoff if we end up playing a Jalen Hurts again at Oklahoma or a Justin Fields at Ohio State. But, you know, it's – I'm not saying I'm worried about Georgia dropping this game, but I'm just saying, you know, watch out for Missouri because just the X factor, the unknown of what's going to be there, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I think if I had to go with a team, I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. Right. I'm going to say Auburn. I think that's a scary game. We know Kirby has lost every season at Georgia to a team in the West on the road. Ole Miss dropped one at Auburn, last year at LSU. So going on the road, Jordan-Hare is always a scary place to play. They can get loud over there. If Auburn's having a good year leading up to that game, you can expect it to be really good. Auburn does have a habit of kind of backing off the throttle when they get down in the season, so that could happen. But you look at Auburn's front on defense, they got Marlon Davidson, Derek Brown's an All-American nose. They got Nick Cole. Then you switch it over on offense. They got speed, which they've always had speed. But last year, you had Schwartz, who's a track star. He's going to go out for the 2020 Olympics, I believe. And you got to think that Eli Stove will be back healthy all year. He missed most of last season with a torn ACL. That's two elite speedsters they have to work in there. But we always talk about with Auburn, it seems every 3 or 4 years, who's going to be the quarterback.
Yeah.
They got Bo Nix. Then they got the other guy, name slips my mind.
Joey Gatewood.
Joey Gatewood, the guy from Florida, the big 6'5", I think 230 pounds, big quarterback. He's what, you know, Malzahn falls in love with him. And I could see him getting the job, but talking to some Auburn people, they seem to be in love with Bo Nix, being Patrick Nix's son, who played at Auburn in the early 90s. But I don't know if Bo Nix is ready for the SEC. He played, won a state championship in Alabama last year. But I just don't know. I think Joey Gatewood's the best option at quarterback, but I don't know who Gus is going to go with.
Yeah, well, if I know anything about Gus, he's going to go with the most athletic guy, which would probably be Joey Gatewood, you know, kind of built from the same frame of a Cam Newton. But for me, I think another X factor in that game is you can't tell me that Gus Malzahn won't have a chip on his shoulder still about George Pickens, even through that. You know, I think it'll be something that's going to not keep him up at night, but, you know, he thinks about it. And he's even admitted so much so a few months back. And it's just it's on top of a rivalry game. I think that's an added factor that could, you know, give Gus a little bit more fuel to the fire, you know, a pregame speech that could hype him up or something along those lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, going back, if you're not aware, George Pickens was committed to Auburn for over a year out of Hoover, played at Hoover High School, committed to Auburn. Then on signing day, he flipped to Georgia. Auburn fans were obviously upset. Auburn players are tweeting out stuff about a money bag man and stuff. And so they were bitter about it. And I get it. Gus even was kind of chippy about it being asked on signing day. But that happens in recruiting. You know, the thing is, Auburn might have let off the gas, him being committed so long. And we know Kirby, Cortez Hankton, the wide receivers coach, has showed he's an elite recruiter. He just ain't got the recognition yet.
Right.
But they don't let off. They go after these people all the time. Demetrius Robertson, as soon as he became available 2 years ago, and Kyle, they just hammer these guys. And that's how you become an elite recruiting school. That's how Georgia made the jump from where we were with Mark Rick, which is a really good recruit. We were in the 9th. We got as high as, I think, 6th. But we were between 9th and 13th all the time. And we thought that was pretty good. Then we get Kirby. And we've had the last 3 years, top 3. And now you're looking at a guy. He goes and gets these guys that's been committed. Tyler Simmons was a guy, 4 years ago now that Kirby went and got committed to Alabama for a long time. And, did Simmons, is he going to have much of an impact his freshman year? Pickens is going to have? No. Simmons was a 4-star. Pickens is a great 5-star wide receiver, huge body, great athlete. And I think it's going to make a big difference. I think he's going to, be fired up for that game, being from Alabama, being committed for so long.
Yeah, I just think it's a cool extra storyline that'll be added to that game.
You always have the storylines of how many Georgia players are on the Auburn roster. They got to come into. If you're going to win, especially in the SEC, and Clemson's even showed it, you got to recruit the state of Georgia. That is a must. You have to come into Georgia. And with Mark Rick, we recruited Georgia well, but we weren't getting the elite players out of the state every year. Definitely weren't getting elite linemen. The Jameer Sawyer, Andrew Thomas. These are guys that we might would have lost, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I think that makes a big difference. But Auburn, they do scare me. This is going to be the last time we play in November. Next year it moves up to the last week of September, I believe. First week of October, it'll flip around. We'll switch to them in Tennessee. So it's always, my whole life, been a cold game and a November game. So it going early in the season, this being that last November meeting, it's going to add a little bit to it because the fan base is going to be fired up.
Oh, yeah.
And the last time we went to Jordan-Hare, 2017, we were number 1 in the playoff rankings. Everybody was fired up. We go to Auburn. We score. First drive, go up 7-0. Then we get waxed 40-17, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That can't happen this year. I think now if Georgia's undefeated going into that game, they cannot have this hiccup because then everybody's going to say Georgia's doing to Georgia. And Clemson heard that for years. You pulled a Clemson. They Clemson this game. Until they won that national championship, that didn't go away.
Right.
And once they won that first natty.
And even when they do get one, I still don't think it's going to go away. I think you're going to have the pockets of Bama fans who want to say, built by Bama or, whatever snide comments.
Are Bama fans saying that because they really believe it? Or are they saying that because they don't want to give Georgia any credit? Because they know Georgia is the only team in the SEC.
They don't want to give us any credit.
We're the only team in the SEC and probably in the country that can build up. We're already showing we can build up to where they're at. But if we start winning, we can win at their level. And they know not many schools in the SEC has the access to Atlanta, has the access to these guys that we can get. Clemson showed they come into the state, but what they did in the past is rack up on the Georgia 3-star players in the state. They built their depth using that, and that's a real. It was really good what they were doing because obviously it led to 2 of the last 4 national championships. But when they started getting Deshaun Watson, then they started pulling these elite players out of the state, Trevor Lawrence, and next thing you know, they're winning national championships. You got to go into the state of Georgia to recruit. Even in the 90s, you look at Tennessee. When they had Jamal Lewis, he was out of Georgia. They used to get all their great play. Peerless Price, I believe, was from the state of Georgia. Tennessee had their big run. The only team that really didn't do it was Florida, and they dominated the state of Florida in recruiting. Then Urban Meyer did. Right now, Georgia's dominating the state of Florida.
Well, Georgia's dominating a few states right now, and I think
dominating Tennessee ain't as big a deal.
Yeah.
Or Alabama, when you go get a Clay Webb and a George Pickens from Alabama. But when you go get Sony Michel in the past, or even Tyreek Stevenson, Tyson Campbell, you get these guys out of Florida.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Going into South Florida and getting these guys is a huge
from the
deal.
Miami can't get them. Florida State can't get them. Florida can't get them. They come up to Athens, Georgia. So you're showing you can go into the state of Florida and get who you want.
Yeah.
And right now, Rosemary coming in for next year. Yeah. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the country. Georgia's getting these elite guys, and it's going to lead to a national championship.
Oh, yeah.
Jake Fromm was in the news, had an article saying he wanted to wear the black jerseys. I think every recruit that comes to Georgia wants to wear black jerseys. Yeah. I think they take the pictures, they see the photos from the past. I don't consider 2016. I'm sorry, Smart's first year. We wore them against Louisiana Lafayette, like a 12 o'clock game. That really wasn't a blackout or nothing to get fired up. I think Kirby just did that because he promised.
He was just throwing the players a bone on that.
So, and now, I know we're not gimmicky. I don't think you wear them as a gimmick. I think you just wear them because that's your school color. Yeah. I mean, that's no difference. Auburn used to wear orange jerseys. Florida wears orange jerseys down in games. They also wear them stupid reptile-looking uniforms. Yeah. But they wear those orange at Florida. You see Florida State with the garnet and gold jerseys back and forth. I don't see nothing wrong with Georgia just wanting to wear a black jersey. But like I've said in the past, I think you make it senior day, or you make it, if you win the East, you could wear a black jersey or something like that. LSU does it the first non-conference game of the season at home, they wear purple. Then after that, they wear the white. Yeah. So you could do something like that, or just wear it when you want to wear it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I don't think it should be made into an event, because that's what kind of got us to that gimmicky thing, and fans kind of freak out about stuff like this. But to me, I just think it's just another uniform, and you don't even have to involve the fans and say y'all need to wear black. You just the kids want to wear black, and it makes them feel better. Then put the black on them. What we got to say about it shouldn't mean anything, or what the other fans have to say about it shouldn't mean anything, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that got to go out and play in it.
Yeah,
they got to win regardless.
The Bama game in 2008. What killed it for people, I don't think it was the black jerseys. I think it was the hype.
The hype of
the whole week. We're going to wear black. They painted the end zone letters black instead of red. So everything was made in this big spectacle.
Right.
Then we got smoked on the field.
Yeah, that was the problem, because they made it such a big deal. And
we got embarrassed. And that feeling of not losing stuck with people. It's the embarrassment of being fired up. And not how they looked on TV. It's how they felt inside was the emotional letdown. And I don't understand that into a sense of you just got to move on. I mean, I was more let down when we lost the 2nd and 26 game and then the SEC championship last year than I was the blackout in 2008.
Right.
Which that game catapulted Alabama.
Yeah.
They won that game. That led them to just a magical run that they're still on, and it knocked Rick down. I mean, I know 2012 we got within 6 yards, but we never got back to that hype from the 07-08 team.
Well, it was up and down. It was a roller coaster ride, because you go 2012 and that was all great, and then you shoot to 2015 and it was just devastation.
Or go the other way from 2012 to 2010.
Mm-hmm.
We lost to Central Florida in the Liberty Bowl. So Georgia was always wishy-washy. Now, obviously, Kirby 24-5 the last 2 seasons. We're still projecting up. We're still rising. We're not where we're going to be. We're going to get better than what we are. And these recruiting classes are why these coaches. Kirby's brought in elite coaches. Sam Pittman is a great recruiter. More so than that, he's a great developer. You look at the guys, 2 years with Isaiah Wynn, he's on the Patriots. You look at how he develops his talent. He did it at Arkansas. He done it at Tennessee. They always had great offensive lines. So Cortez Hankton's coming in. You see the work of the wide receiver, how much better they are than how they work. Coley was a great coach. I don't know if he was a great wide receivers coach.
Right. He's a good offensive mind, but I think Cortez Hankton's a good dude. He's comes in and just gets straight to grinding, and I think that's what we want to see. We don't want a whole lot of talk. Just want to put nose to the grindstone and get these wide receivers where they need to be.
All right, well, that's all we got this week. You can get on Twitter at NothingFinerPod. Follow us on there. Go to Facebook.com/NothingFinerPod. We got a YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube, search Nothing Finer Pod. We come up on there. Please subscribe. Go right down wherever it is on here. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. This week, Austin's rocking the 76.com. It's the Gator hat. I got the Junkyard. You can get them at the76.com. That's the letters, not the numbers. The76.com. Click on there. Hats, shirts, whatever you need. We'll see you next week. God bless, and go Dogs.